So, hi audience, good afternoon to everyone. Hope you all are doing well at your respective regions. So, as you know that today we have this very interesting topic that is common mistakes that make APIs vulnerable. Before covering the main topic, it is very important that we touch on relevant base regarding what APIs are basically. So, APIs are the backbone of today's modern digital communication. When I say backbone, it means they act as an essential bridge that enables different applications, services, databases, and even the devices to connect and exchange data smoothly. So let's break it down to a simple everyday example. Think of them as a waiter at a restaurant. You, being a user, place an order, which is a request. The waiter takes that request to the kitchen, which can be assumed as a server or a database, and obviously return back with a mail, which is a response. So, whether it is connecting with different cloud platforms or integrating third-party services such as Google Maps and Zomato and Swiggy, processing payments, APIs are behind every digital interaction that we see today. And I must say that it is truly uplifting to see such a great turnout of professionals eager to enhance their understanding in API security. The counts are good. However, despite their importance, they sometimes overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity viewpoint, making them prime targets for the malicious actors. So in today's discussion, we will be conversing on common vulnerabilities in API and how attackers exploit them. We will be looking to the role of authorization, authentication, and input validation in API security. We will be also looking to some best practices to safeguard API endpoint and sensitive data. Last but not least, we will be looking to a real world example of an API breach and a lesson that we can learn from it. So, audience, to make this guest speaker joining us today, let me introduce them. First, we have Mr. Kamlesh Prasad, DGM, IT Operations, Infrastructure and Cybersecurity at Nexus Select Malls Management Private Limited. He is a recognized leader in the cybersecurity domain with over 25 plus years of experience protecting critical digital infrastructures and leading large-scale security initiatives. Welcome, Kamlesh.
Thank you. Thank you, Hassan. Hi everyone. Hi, this is Kamlesh, and thanks Hassan, thanks Samriddhi Kritika, and thanks Team Kritika to invite me for such a wonderful session. And I'm very excited to address the audience on API and their securities and common vulnerabilities to discuss. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you, Kamlesh, as well. Next, joining us, Mr. Gujaman Dinardanan, Head of Technology at iOrbit Digital Technologies Private Limited. With 20 plus years of rich experience, he today brings a wealth of knowledge on building efficient and secure APIs. His career spans various leadership roles, showcasing his expertise in delivering strategic technology initiatives with an operational excellence. Welcome, Gujaman sir.
Thanks, Hassan. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. Thank you.
All right. So, audience, let's start by setting a stage. We are now familiar with what APIs are. We have seen a very daily life example of it to understand it in a better way. However, to make our concept more clearer, and when we have two industry experts with us, we cannot miss this chance to cover all the aspects from technical viewpoint. So, Kamlesh, coming to you, I would be requesting you to help me and our audience to know a basic flow of an API, how it makes a request, and in what manner that request is either get accepted or rejected. The stage is yours.
Surely, thank you. So, hi everyone. As on the screen, an API call proceeds are as follows. So, something which is not written on the screen, I'll discuss that. So, ideally, an API. What's an API? It's an application which tries to initiate a request to a specific endpoint. It's called an API. An API which a call is received and the endpoint which delivers to a server is the basic role of an API. The API endpoints authenticate requests. It ensures to call to a legitimate source, and the format uses correct protocol like SOAP, REST, RPC are the schemas. So these are the basic protocols where we can see these are the how an API ideally works. An API endpoint returns to the requested data to the API client. So there's a two-way authentication, two-way communication when an API does. It sends the data and it receives an information from the recipient. This is how an API works from endpoint to client, and where the app development team uses these codes to get the API integration done. We also build security like how in a native IT infrastructure and operations we have a firewall. We also have API gateways which are responsible for receiving, routing, rerouting, delivering the API request to the relevant server with an authentication mode. They may also handle a rate. They should not may they should handle rate limiting, authentication, security policy enforcement, and number of the other functions, which makes the entire API packet, the API call a legitimate, secure, and a safe way of communication. Hence, the application log request from endpoint to a server is called an API call.
Wonderful. That was really sagacious knowledge indeed. Thank you, Kamleshwar. Now I'm able to relate or map it to the example that I discussed previously with the daily life one. So I believe that is same with our audience. In case anybody has any queries or doubts regarding the basic knowledge of an API, they may put it in a chat box so that we can cover it in the later part when we will be discussing the Q&A session. Alright, so moving forward, before coming to the question directly, Vajaman sir, I would like to highlight a data here. The data says that there are 3000% increase in the API related attacks in India for the JAS quarter 2024. Further adding to that, API focused DDoS attacks increased 85% as compared to attacks on websites. These are the very recent statistics and numbers are concerning. So my question to you, do you feel that API security is one of the top most challenges currently we have in today's landscape? Also, I want to understand basically and help our audience to understand as well that what common vulnerabilities generally we encounter when we are dealing with the term API. So over to you, Vajaman sir.
Hi Hassan, yeah. So what you said is correct. Like the relevance of API in the IT application scenario is increasing, drastically increased in the last 1 decade. So if you look at the application architecture and the web traffic, if you look at the web traffic, today's web traffic, the 90% of the web traffic is from API calls. If you look back for 10 years back, this was just 40%. So the increase in API related to traffic is now became double fold. So now let us look at the architecture of today's application. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is the common architecture of a application which we are building today, whether it is a web application, whether it is a mobile application. So you can see that here the API is the gateway for accessing the services which we are exposing to the application. In case of web application, most of the web application which is implemented nowadays are single page web applications, which is completely relying on the background API, and all these API functions are called from the JavaScript or some scripting language in the front end. Likewise, if you look at the mobile application also, they are all depending upon I don't think there is any standalone application is releasing nowadays. All these are actually depending upon some kind of APIs in the background. And this is applicable for devices also. In our case, we are building medical devices. All these medical devices are now connected, and they are all actually using depending on some API. Somebody can go to the next slide. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So this is another scenario. As I said, API is the primary actor or the backbone of our today's applications. Most of these APIs further consuming other APIs, like in most cases, your application may be depending on some databases. In today's scenario, most of these are actually cloud databases like MongoDB, FireCloud, Firebase, or something like that. And in addition to that, API may be consuming many other services. So it is very important when we are designing an application today. It is very important to make sure that the API backbone is completely secure, and also we have to make sure that the other APIs which we are consuming is also safe. So these are the things like as Hassan said, there is a drastic increase in the in exposing these vulnerabilities. So we have to, as application developers, we have to make sure that the API, which is the backbone of today's application, is secure. And in the next slide, I just explained put some of the common vulnerabilities. I'm not going deep into these things. I just put a LinkedIn article in my profile. You can go through that, and I'm explaining all these things in very detail there, and the option to the best practices to avoid these mistakes as well. Thanks, sir.
All right, Vijay sir. Thank you so much for the information that you have presented through a pictorial representation. Thank you so much for that information that you have provided, and it makes easier to understand why it is a top challenging task. Also, the concept of rate limiting was very informative, to be very frank. Now, coming to the core topic of today's discussion, which is common mistakes that make APIs vulnerable. From the viewpoint of companies and covering the macro level, the mistakes that developers make while the API is in design and implementation. So, starting with you, Kamlesh, I would request you that you take a lead on the mistakes that you have experienced that companies make while securing their APIs. Over to you, Kamlesh.
Surely, Hassan. Thank you. Thanks, Benjamin, for the lovely insights. And as rightly on the screen, it says the common mistakes by companies, or the mistakes what we day to day we see while our audits, or why any kind of exercise which are very commonly seen by big companies, not a new one, not the startups, are can be discussed today. So basically, your API is your what it says, like the name application programming interface, which I rightly said, an endpoint on a very layman endpoint connected to a server taking a packet of information. The API can be full, can have a few of competitive advantages which can bring the business by providing best business intelligence, faster data with cloud deployments, and it can enable a lot of AI capabilities if configured properly. At the same time, an API can introduce new risks by allowing outside parties to access organization data. It can be PII information, it can be organization internal data if it is not been taken well care of. These days, the API are very critical in modern mobile, SaaS, and web application when we try to configure. The most common mistakes is the mass assignments data attacks due to poor access control. So this is very important thing when we see that a lot of developers, a lot of team members get into habit of shared access, common access, weak passwords to get the job done. Try to have a mass integration done. So and the remediation is also very poor. It gets missed during the regular validation of user ID and access control. So one of the major issues is poor access control, and also it is having privileged access to many people. Like you give edit access, you get immediate access to a lot of people. So there are people who are dispatchers, who are pushing the packages, can avoid such kind of privileged access. So having a good access control and a regular review of your access control really helps keeping the API integration well, lack of encryption for data. Like it can be sensitive data, of course, because API carries a lot of confidential and PII information when we try to integrate a critical application. So having a better encryption and encryption which are been certified by NIST, certain regulatory has to be implemented when you try to have your data integration enabled label configured. Failure to validate the input leading to ingestion attacks. So the lot of time the lot of time the APIs are not tested or they are not being governed well, and which go live without a proper POC and UAT. These can lead such kind of ingestion attacks. Improper handling and exposing system details. Again, rightly I said, this is also covered in poor access control and unprivileged access control. So try to have the handling of data systems, and the system which where API is been moved and stored has to be safeguarded. The publicly exposed APIs without adequate restrictions. Again, it comes with your access control, where you expose your data, your servers, your endpoints, and your API integrated gateway without a good restriction, without having authenticated tool, without having a good encryption, leads to common mistakes by companies, by seniors, and by L3, L2 consultants. Compromise data. So these are the few things, and it is really important to stick to basics. My friend Bijuman can understand. He is one of the senior veterans in application development. We cannot have a loose control on when we try to develop, though it's our regular work. But basics, the checklist, and also you should have a strict checklist. Over the period of time, it has to revise your checklists to have a better controls on your organization API and other developments. These are the common mistakes what we do.
That was really fruitful, Kamlesh, and I think the part that you have discussed for the privilege access, I think the least privilege access or the concept, if you would like to elaborate a little on it, I think that would be helpful for our audiences.
So, yes, Hassan, segregation of duties what is to be mentioned. It's not least and it's not privilege. Someone has been assigned a task, so the access has to be provided.
Correct.
So RB is role-based access control is one of the key pointers. Then time-based access control, and also user behavioral access controls. You can geotag your access is on what lat long, what location, what time specific has to be used. Those are the access control which you can put. So giving a smaller access and getting work done is also not correct, because if your developer are having limited access, they cannot deliver your work. So giving a proper access control with having all the protocols in mind, your geotagging, your user behavior, and also time-based and role-based will really help the organization for any
Yes,
kind of.
absolutely correct. I think that perspective we also should look forward to, not just having that the least access that we have to give to get our work done. So that was wonderful. So Bijaman sir, coming to you, not breaking the flow of this answer, as rightly said by Kamlesh, that he's presented entirely from the organization viewpoint, the companies that make. But the macro part you have to cover, since you are in this, you being a CTO also of a company. So from your point, what common mistakes do these developers make while the API is in implementation and design phase?
Yes, Hassan, I'll take it from what Mr. Kamlesh already said. Like those are the common mistakes what is happening usually. But if you look at this on the development perspective, everything is actually starting from authentication. So in authentication, the common mistakes I found which developers usually commit is like they probably use a get URL for authentication. Using a get URL is an absolute wrong method for implementing an authentication mechanism. It is better to use host and use the API body for sending those credentials. And always make sure that you are using an HTTPS connection. So saying that, I will always prefer to use a third-party authentication service instead of implementing all these authentication mechanisms in our application itself. But the third-party applications usually provide you authentication, but authorization probably has to implement inside your application itself. So that is another big mistake the developers usually commit. They do authentication and they obtain the token. But when it comes to the other API calls, which is actually implementing some functionalities, they usually fail to check the authorization part. They just validate the token and then go ahead and execute the functionality. So these kind of mistakes can usually cause a lot of data exposure, and sometimes an unauthorized person can probably delete your user or delete your valid data, or all these things can happen if we fail to implement such authorization or role-based authorization checkings in your application. And another big mistakes usually the developers commit is they will forget or they will ignore the input validation. This will cause sometimes this will cause the crash of the application if somebody send a wrong input into the API call. And in addition to that, this lack of input validation will allow hackers to do SQL ingestion, script ingestion, all these kind of malicious activities. And then the third thing, as Mr. Kamalesha said, like the data exposure. So there is an API call which is requesting some user parameters. Sometimes what developers do is okay, this is this API call is requesting user detail. So they will provide all the information regarding that user which is in the database in that API call, assuming that they are making it generic, so that this same API can be used elsewhere. But this is actually giving out all the information about the user to the hacker's hand. So limit the data exposure. Whatever is required for that API, only those information is supposed to exposure into the API call. Yeah, as Mr. Kamalesha said, the rate limiting is a big thing in API implementation. So this can be implemented using some third-party gateways and other things. But in some cases, as a developer mistake example, I'll always say this one as an example. Like you are implementing a login API, and in the front end you may be limiting number of attempts. Like if you try 3 times, 4 times, then the front end will stop you from trying again. But the API may be implemented without any rate limiting there. You can call this API how many times you want. You can call this, and if it is falling into the hacker's hand, they can actually do brute force and break that and get into your application. So rate limiting is very much important, not just for limiting the DOS attacks, but also for avoiding these kind of attacks as well. Yeah, so another common mistake in the development process is we probably as an application developer focus easily on implementing the functionalities. So in a hurry, we probably ignore the security implementation, which is as important as implementing the application. So that needs to be embedded into your development process. And another thing is blindly trusting the third-party APIs. So if it is provided by some third party, we assume that it is secure, and we just start using it. So this kind of, if it is not secure, it is actually affecting our application security as well. And while developing, sometimes developers may be logging the username and password, but in a hurry they may forget it, I'm just saying an example. Like this, they may be exposing user details or credit card details or something into the law. That is also something we need to be very careful about. Yeah, these are the things which I want to
All
highlight.
right, Vijay, sir. That was really very a full package of the knowledge that you and Kamleshwar has given to our audience. And literally, we have covered the main aspect of our today's discussion as well. So I would like to, go through my audience that if you have any questions or concerns as we cover the main aspect of today's webinar, I would request to please put it on chat, right? I can see a couple of questions coming on, but I would request my audience to show some zeal in asking the question, as you won't be getting these two industry experts again. Maybe through social media you can connect, but still, it's a right privilege and right time to ask all your queries. So yes, we have seen about what APIs are. We got to know about its flow. We have discussed how challenging it is, and the mistakes, the very aspects of our discussion. We have covered that also. Now it's time to shift our gear towards the best practices part, basically. So I would like to ask Kamleshwar to you. You are in this industry from last 25 years, if I'm not wrong. And if I ask you, what will be your top recommendations to the companies who keep identifying and mitigating the vulnerabilities?
Surely, Hassan. Thanks again, Benjamin, for the lovely insights. Recommendation from me will be few. As rightly on the screen, you can see we should conduct a regular vulnerability and penetration testing for the organization as per to the organization data exposed on internet. If you don't have a payment gateway and you're not liable for a lot of things in the for the outside world, so basic to basic, you should at least have yearly once or by yearly VAP done by a cert in. If you are in India, it has to be a cert in and paneled partner. There are many in the list, and world class are many few more. So try to see do a VAP from the top in enhanced API security top 10 work. So OWASP help you. It's an NGO which runs and helps the organization to build a safe web application security project, which helps everyone worldwide. So the key aspects of OWASP is broken access control, cryptographic failures to have better encryption, to have a secure design, and they also help you for Z attack. So follow the top 10 framework of OWASP. They try to update regularly on the internet, so do follow them. Integrate your security checks using CI/CD pipelines to have a proper framework of your data flow, which helps you to know at every interval about your security checks has been done. Adopt zero trust is a real value add in these days modern world. To have zero trust, trust no one and give access is a model which everyone should follow. From swiping your ID card to the organization or logging to your VPN to access to a server and download a data or attachment, everywhere if you find, you should have a zero trust. So same should apply for your APIs, that every interval and every change of the API call, there should be a zero trust implemented. So adopting zero trust principles for a stricter access control is a continuous validation checks for your API call, and comprehensive API testing using standardized checklists. So there should be the certain or NIST and standardized checklist made for your API, which helps you to run through your work, automate your key checks like authentication, parameter validation, So a lot of time we have multi-factor authentication and dual authentication, single sign-on. So make sure such automated checks are done, but then it has to be also intercepted on quiet intervals. Implement organization-wide API strategy for uniformity. So the practice has to be common. It has to be world class. It has to be as per to the regulatory, and follow same strategies for all the APIs, being it critical, being it non-critical data packet or sensitive information which is being carried. But there should be a practice of following strategy for the uniformity, and leverage AI. Having AI tools to build API is really fantastic. It really reduces your workload, but then you should also have a early detection of the vulnerabilities. So we can also have a lot of AI tools to detect your APIs. And I can just see one question from one gentleman. Rohit was asking about what is SDL. So would like to speak about here because it is a very topic. A lot of people know what is SDLC, software defined lifecycle, but SDL is a new terminology which is used to have security development life cycle. It was practiced by Microsoft 20 years back, but now it has become a global practice where the SDL team involves into modifying a software development phase, having a security team from day one. So when you try to build your API, your software, the security team is part of the development team. So you make a secure environment from day one. So you don't have to close the vulnerabilities in UAT and POCs. So these are the few of the mitigation vulnerabilities which you should follow. Right?
All right, Kamlesh, I think the contrast that you have given, actually, I was assuming SDL and SDLC only, but yeah, that is also one key check for mitigating and keep identifying the vulnerabilities. Also, yes, it is true that from very beginning we should have that checklist with us where we can map and everything we can check against it, right? So that is also a key note from this particular discussion. Now, Vijayan sir, coming to you, as you are leading a technology department that I operate, right? If I ask on a very larger perspective that let's suppose we want to have a security culture around API development, what will be your viewpoint and what will be your suggestions for that?
Yes, Hassan. Yeah, so before I jump into this, Mr. Kamaleshwar covered beautifully many subjects like zero trust, VAPT, VAPT, and so many other things he covered
Yeah,
very.
he covered the frameworks as well, right? The best practices, all the frameworks he has listed down.
And use of AI tools, all those things are very valid points which we need to apply into an organization culture. So let me start with what we can what we can do to improve the security implementation of an organization. It's actually part of an organization culture. So this should start from the leadership commitment. So they must be committed for implementing the security and security protocol uh, uh, in the entire organization. See, I'm doing a lot of consultancy with different companies. So some places I found that security is not a concern at all. So then the leadership is not committed, and then what happens is if you look at the application, there may be no security at all. So that is a very important thing that leadership needs to be committed for the implementation of security. And then if that is done, then all these things will definitely will happen. We should train the developers regularly and about all these security principles, and there should be some checklist and other things which is following in the company. There should be an SOP, standard operating procedure, how all these things are done, how the APIs and all other applications are developed. All these are actually part of the organization culture. And another thing is like use different tools. Like threat modeling is a nice tool to identify all the possible threats that can expose in an application. So once you do the threat modeling, you can actually make sure that those threats are addressed in your application development. And then secure code practices. Use tools like Sonar Cloud. And in our organization, we also use LLMs like ChatGPT and other things for implementing custom GPT for processing the APIs. So while when you are using LLM and other things, be careful about exposing your critical application logic and other things to the internet. So, but all these things can be used for improving your application security. And also for rate limiting and other things, implement gateways for imposing policies and rate limits and monitoring. So these are some aspects, and one of my favorite is like use interceptors while implementing APIs. So the interceptors are a piece of code which is executed before your API's actual logic is executed. So these interceptors you can use for input validation, authorization, and authentication and authorization. All this you can implement in one single piece of code and use it across all your APIs. So this will also make sure that you will not miss doing that in different APIs. Maybe your development team may be diverse with freshers to highly experienced people. So if you are assigning this to some junior developers, there is chances that they will miss it. So if you are using interceptors, this will be the same code will be executed for all these different APIs which you are implementing. If your platform is not supporting interceptors, you can implement some static classes or something which you can call out before, which you can insist that all developers has to call this piece of code before they actually start implementing the API's actual functionality.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you both have highlighted pointers on the third party related APIs, right? So it should be done and where it is accepted in many of the audits, compliance audits that we do. So we also keep educating our clients and even the prospects with whom we are reaching about the importance of it. Though they somehow dependent on the open source tool, but we suggest them to adopt the best practice. And thank you for highlighting it, as well as the leadership commitment that you have highlighted. I think that is very immense, something which is very important. The top hierarchy, if they are very well, strict with respect to the culture that they have to build, I think everything will be sorted from there itself. So that is a very base point where things get started. So I think the most of the pointers that we initially discussed in the beginning are covered, except the one. I think Kamlesh sir is here for that. And Kamlesh sir, I know that you must be having all the cases and many examples in your bucket. But I would like to highlight one of the cases of the API breach and what lesson we can learn from. Any synopsis that you will be presenting that would be sufficient for today's discussion.
I have three, which was one of Facebook API, then a T-Mobile token, and one is a Uber classic case. There's a which I can show you in Uber, like what happened in September 2019. A critical bug was discovered in Uber API, which allowed merchants, riders, and service provider to share services to the customer. So which they allowed the merchant and service provider and others to offer a share ride to the customers. And Uber had exposed a vulnerable API endpoint that allowed attackers to this API allowed attackers to steal the valuable data, and including PII, which is really very close to everyone's personal information, and with the authentication tokens and for riders and drivers. Luckily, the leak was found, but the leak the leak authentication token could use a full takeover of the account. Luckily, it was found in time, and the vulnerability was discovered and was closed on time, which really helped the loss should to cover the losses. But yeah. But my personal I picked this topic because we share a lot of our credit card information, auto pay, our credentials, our address, everything is there in Uber. Okay, so if such thing is been breached, my residence, my office, my all information is gone, and you can have the technical details is mentioned in the link where it's been posted, how it happened, what is the script, and how it was remediated. So the thing which I want to highlight here is Uber is one case. There are a lot of happening in world, and these are companies who can afford VAPT every day, who might have hired the best in class technicians, best in class cyber experts, and but still things go unnoticed because the uniformity, the checklist, and the basics are not followed. And like interceptors, like how Bijuman said right now, those were not there in place, which uh, lead to such kind of exposure. So try to see that we take the task seriously, do regular checks and balances, follow checklists, follow policies and procedures to keep a safe environment. And having always a restoration DR drill is again a good thing to the best practice in cyber world. So you are always governed with good technologies, and make sure that you have a bug bounty kind of program. And a lot of people might not aware of this word called bug bounty. Bug bounty is a program where organization who opens the program for outsiders or internal employees to find a bug in the app, and they reward them. They reward them with money, and it's a monetary benefit where people do hacking, and they inform the developer team company that we found these vulnerabilities, and they get rewarded in this. So organizations should do bug bounty, VAPT things to have a safe environment. Yeah. That's it, Hassan. Thanks.
I think that was very insightful, and I would love to see the technical details that you have mentioned. I would request Samriddhi if she can put that link on chat so that our audience can also go through that, the entire scenarios and how there are other aspects involved in it. But thank you so much. You have covered the synopsis very well. And now I think we should come to the question and answer session. But I can see only a couple of questions are there in the chat. I would request my audience, like we are encouraged to ask whatever doubts that you do not know anything about API. That is very well correct, right? Here we have the industry experts. You can ask a question, clear your doubts, and even if you're from developers viewpoint, you have seen the common mistake that developers make. So from that point of view, also you can put some questions. So I think let's start taking the questions first of all. And then, Bijuman sir, please do not forget, I will come to you at the end for the key takeaway. You have to deliver it.
For me, it seems like what is
I think it is.
Yeah, John.
It's from John Boston. Yes, yes.
So John, the basic mechanism.
Bijuman, they will also have at least knowledge about what you are answering, right? So let me just quickly read it out. So Mr. John Boston written that he has a question: API keys and tokens to prevent from unauthorized access. Bijuman sir, please take that.
Yeah. So John, the normal mechanism is in your environment variable, which is only accessible for the logged in user. And if you want to for AWS or there are so many other mechanisms to store these things safe. So one of these mechanisms you can use for keeping API keys and top.
Now coming to the next question. Karthik, have you ever come across scenarios where over securing APIs has hindered innovation or user experience?
Over securing APIs have hindered innovation or user experience. this is not come across such a scenario, but yeah, long years when I was working for one of the good organization, uh, someone said that if you put more controls, your work will be slower, but it will be safer. So you invest less time to investigate on RCAs. So will hinder. You have you, you have a commercial version of Copilot and get your APIs designed, which is proprietary to your company, rather than using freebies and freewares for building an API. So yes, over securing anything, you over securing your server access, your computer access, your API access will lead to a slow work. But then there are technologies and teams where you can distribute your work and get it done on time. I will not say if you know every day WhatsApp updates and take a rebounds of its server, but it doesn't come to know because the manpower and the automation behind it is humongous, is huge. So having proper team, proper hire will really lead to a good quality of work.
Yes, thank you, Kamlesh. I think Rohit, he has answered your question very perfectly. Now, I think Mr. Clinton wants to ask, I think this is from the perspective of Mr. Bujiman, because he has explained about interceptors. So he's asking, could you please elaborate on API interceptor? Is this a separate code? Bujiman sir.
Yeah. So we are usually using Spring Boot for in our organization. I know that this interceptors is part of Spring Boot, which you can create a common function and configure it using the Spring Boot configuration to, where these to which all API endpoints this needs to be applied, that you can configure. So inside that you can actually create all these different all these checking and security, authorization, authentication, all these things you can do as a separate class and call it there.
Bujiman sir, I think there is also a next question coming up to you. I'm very sorry for that, but you have to answer in continuation. That I think this question is very interesting. That let's suppose if API security breach happens, right? So what steps should an organization should take immediately to respond it or to counter it? What should be your suggestions to them?
Yeah, this will depend on organization to organization, but what I would suggest is immediately withdraw that service or take that service down or implement firewall or in using something, you can stop that service. If it is actually, if you are leaking data, you immediately stop that service by firewall or take it down and investigate it and take steps to solve it.
Alright, I think I cannot see any other questions in the chat box. I would also reiterate to my audience that if still they have any queries or concerns to be cleared out here itself, please put it on chat. We are available for next 5 minutes more, and then we can easily wrap. Audience, please show some zeal. You have industry experts here, right?
It's good participation, but 74, 75 people is a good number.
I think we were that good that we covered entire aspect. We do not have any queries and concerns, right? From the very basic to very peak level, we covered everything.
I think Samriddhi and Hasan, you can share your email IDs where they can put the question, post a call if they have any.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Thanks for suggesting that. All right. So I think we should wrap up this webinar by let me reiterate about my mission or my organization mission, that we are here to secure global infrastructure from identified and unidentified threats. So with this, I would like to thank my esteemed audience, the guest speakers, Mr. Kamlesh and Mr. Bujiman, and Samriddhi, you obviously for from very beginning you are taking care of entire PPTs and you're making us mute, unmute. So thank you so much for your participation to this webinar. And I assure you that we're not going to stop. We will be coming back again with new industry experts as well as with new topics. And if The audience will suggest that they want to see Vijay sir and Kamlesh sir again. We do not have issue to reach out to them again to have their participation. So till then, thank you so much and a very good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks, Samriddhi. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kamlesh. Yeah.